Gregory Sharpe thought he could humiliate anyone who didn't fit his picture of wealth. He saw Daniel and Marcus Hale, two boys in simple clothes, and dismissed them without a second thought. But when Gregory laughed them out the door, he didn't realize who he was turning away. He didn't know Daniel and Marcus were the sons of Victor Hale, a man whose power didn't need flashing lights or loud declarations, a man who believed dignity was earned, not worn. And when Victor learned what happened, the price for arrogance would be swift and unforgettable. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because the story you're about to hear isn't just about two boys in a dealership. It's about how we judge, how we act, and who we become. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Whitmore Luxury Motors that morning, casting cold beams across the marble floors. For a moment, everything seemed still, waiting, expectant, just before the world would learn the true weight of character over appearance. The late afternoon sun cast long golden shadows across the glossy floors of Whitmore Luxury Motors. It was the kind of place where every square inch whispered exclusivity, where smiles were polished and prices were hidden behind careful conversations. Through the grand glass doors, two teenage boys stepped inside, Daniel and Marcus. Their clothes were simple, faded cargo shorts, plain white t-shirts, sneakers worn thin at the heels. They paused, wide-eyed, at the sight of the gleaming hypercars lined up like metallic lions in a gallery. For a heartbeat, the world stood still for them, a boyhood dream unfolding in real life. But not everyone shared their wonder. From behind a nearby display, a salesman emerged. His name was Gregory, a man whose suit spoke louder than his words, and whose eyes sharpened the moment they fell on the boys. Slowly, deliberately, Gregory approached, his steps echoing through the marble hall like a judge preparing a sentence. "Can I help you?" His voice dripped with disdain, each syllable carved a wound. We were just wondering about that model," Daniel said, pointing at a sleek midnight blue hypercar. Gregory let out a dry chuckle. "That one? Starts at $900,000, he sneered. His gaze traveled from their dusty sneakers to their unbranded shirts. "I think you're in the wrong place, gentlemen." Around them, a few customers stifled their laughter. A couple seated nearby exchanged a glance that said everything. What are they even doing here? Marcus shifted uncomfortably, eyes dropping to the floor. Daniel's cheeks flushed a deep crimson. Without a word, they turned away, their shoulders weighed down by something heavier than rejection, by judgment. Outside, the automatic doors whispered shut behind them with a hiss far colder than any words. Have you ever been made to feel invisible in a place you dared to dream? In that single, searing moment, a simple visit became a wound neither would forget. As Daniel and Marcus reached for their bikes, still stinging from the humiliation, a voice called out behind them, soft, firm, and completely unexpected. "Wait a second, boys," the woman said. They turned, hesitating. Standing just inside the glass doors was a woman in her early 30s, dressed in a simple cream blouse and black slacks. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and unlike Gregory's polished arrogance, her presence felt steady, grounded, human. Her name was Elena. "I saw you admiring the Tempest Hyperion," she said, smiling warmly. "Would you like to learn a bit more about it?" The boys exchanged wary glances. After the way they'd been treated, could they trust anyone in this place? Still, curiosity tugged at them stronger than doubt. Slowly, they rolled their bikes back toward the entrance. Helena didn't rush. She knelt slightly, speaking at their level, not above them. She pointed out the handcrafted titanium engine, the aerodynamics that made the car almost weightless on the road, the legacy of innovation behind every detail. Her voice wasn't laced with sales tactics. It carried the rhythm of someone who loved what she spoke about, and remarkably, she never once mentioned the price. For a brief moment, the boys forgot the stares, the whispers. They were just streamers again, standing at the edge of something magnificent. "Would you like to sit inside?" she asked gently, her eyes kind. Daniel's jaw dropped slightly. "Really?" "Of course," Elena said, stepping back to open the butterfly door with a graceful sweep. They climbed in carefully, reverently, touching nothing, soaking in the scent of leather and the quiet hum of craftsmanship. No selfies, no foolishness, just awe. When they finally stepped out, Elena handed them a sleek business card. "If you have more questions, you can call me any time," she said. How often in life does a single act of grace change the direction of someone's story? As they rode away, heads lifted a little higher. They didn't just leave with dreams, they left with dignity. The mansion sat quietly atop the rolling hills, its silhouette etched against the fading sun like a secret too grand to be spoken aloud. Daniel and Marcus pedaled up the long, winding driveway, their bikes dwarfed by towering cypress trees and stone statues lining the path. The grand double doors opened with a low creak as they entered. Inside, the world was awash in warm amber light, filtering through vaulted glass walls onto polished marble floors. No staff rushed to greet them. They needed none. This was home. They dropped their backpacks by the foyer, sneakers scuffing softly against the floor, and exchanged a look that carried the weight of everything unspoken. Then silently, they made their way down the hall toward the study, the place where truth always found its voice. Behind the half-closed doors, their father sat, still and composed, at a grand piano. Marcus hesitated, then pushed the door open a little wider. "Back already?" their father asked, his voice even, unreadable. His name was Victor Hale, a man whose name alone stirred boardrooms and headlines, though he rarely sought attention. The boys nodded, Daniel swallowing hard. "Everything all right?" Victor asked, setting down the untouched glass in his hand. Daniel opened his mouth, but the automatic lie caught in his throat. "No, not really," he admitted. Victor gestured toward the leather chairs near the fireplace. They sat, shoulders stiff, hearts thudding. The story spilled out slowly. The judgment, the laughter, the quiet humiliation. Victor listened without interruption, his face a mask of careful attention. "Did you tell them who you were?" he asked when they finished. Marcus shook his head firmly. "No, sir. We didn't think it mattered." Victor's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, not of amusement, but of approval. "Why do people treat you differently just because of how you look?" Marcus asked, his voice small. Victor stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring into the burnished skyline. "Because some people," he said quietly, "confuse appearance with worth, and that mistake always tells you more about them than it ever does about you. Have you ever been judged by your cover before your story was even heard?" The room fell into a thoughtful silence, heavier and yet somehow clearer, as if something essential had just been passed down, a legacy no money could buy. Later that night, after the dishes had been cleared and the quiet notes of a forgotten jazz record drifted through the mansion, Victor Hale retreated to his private study. The boys had gone to their rooms, but the memory of their slumped shoulders lingered in the walls like smoke. Victor sat behind his mahogany desk, fingers steepled in thought. In front of him lay two sleek black key fobs, each embossed with the spirit of ecstasy. Without hesitation, he picked up his phone and made a single decisive call. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice low and even, "have both boat tails delivered to the dealership at precisely 8 a.m. No exceptions." He paused, listening to the acknowledgement on the other end, then added, almost as an afterthought, "Tell the drivers to wait. I want them seen before they are heard." He ended the call, set the phone down, and leaned back into his chair, the leather groaning quietly beneath him. His face betrayed no triumph, no anger, only an unshakable calm, the kind that spoke not of revenge, but of setting the record straight. Because sometimes true power doesn't need to shout, it merely arrives. Victor rose and crossed to the window, watching as the city lights blinked below like scattered stars. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, but he did not let it surface fully. He wasn't planning a spectacle. He was offering a lesson, not just for the dealership, but for his sons too. In a world that so often mistakes noise for importance, how powerful is the act of answering with silence and certainty? Down the hall, Daniel and Marcus slept, unaware that tomorrow would not only change how others saw them, but how they would see themselves. Outside, the night wrapped the mansion in a hush of expectation, the air heavy with the kind of promise that only few ever get to witness, and even fewer ever understand. Morning broke crisp and bright over Whitmore luxury motors. Salesmen adjusted their ties, baristas frothed milk for cappuccinos, and the scent of polished leather floated lazily through the air. It was just another day chasing commissions. Until it wasn't. At exactly 8:00 a.m., two Rolls-Royce boat tails glided up the curved entrance like ships cutting through still water. One obsidian black, the other royal blue with rose gold accents. Each car exuded a quiet authority that turned heads before the engines even stopped purring. Inside, conversation stumbled into silence. Gregory, the same salesman who had mocked Daniel and Marcus, glanced out the floor-to-ceiling windows and froze. His smirk faltered. His coffee trembled in his hand. The rear doors opened in perfect synchronization. First, Daniel and Marcus stepped out, wearing the same faded shorts and white t-shirts. They looked exactly as they had the day before. Except now, they stood straighter, their expressions calm, unshaken. Then Victor Hale emerged, adjusting the cuffs of his dark gray suit with clinical precision. He didn't need to announce himself, his presence did that for him. He walked forward, the dealership's automatic doors parting before him as if the very air understood it was time to clear a path. Inside, staff and customers instinctively stepped aside, the way people might move for royalty or a gathering storm. Gregory scrambled to meet them, pasting a bright, strained smile on his face. "Good morning, sir. How can I help?" Victor's gaze sliced through him like a blade. "No," Victor said, his voice calm but final. "I'd like to speak with the person who actually assisted my sons yesterday." The room stiffened. A sharp, invisible line had been drawn. Have you ever witnessed a moment so heavy with truth that even the walls seemed to lean in, just to listen? Gregory's smile cracked. His hands fidgeted uselessly at his sides. For once, the man who had spoken too quickly the day before had nothing left to say. The manager appeared moments later, face pale, breathless, as if the very air had thickened under Victor's gaze. Wordlessly, he vanished into his glass-walled office to review the security footage. An oppressive stillness settled over the showroom, so thick it seemed to muffle even the ticking of the wall clock. When he returned, his expression left no room for doubt. "We reviewed the tapes, Mr. Hale," the manager said, his voice tight with shame. "It was Elena who assisted your sons, professionally." He turned slightly toward Gregory, who now looked small, almost shrunken inside his immaculate suit. "And this gentleman," the manager's voice hardened, "misrepresented the situation. His conduct was unacceptable." Victor simply nodded once, as if that had been inevitable. Without needing another word, Gregory was dismissed, fired on the spot. He didn't protest. He didn't beg. He simply gathered what little dignity he could and left, the automatic doors hissing shut behind him like the closing of a judgment. Justice had been served, but Victor wasn't done. "Bring me Elena," he said, voice low but filled with something that made the entire staff lean in, almost against their will. Elena emerged from the back office, brow furrowed with confusion. When she spotted Daniel and Marcus, her face softened instantly, but then flickered with concern. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice steady. Victor smiled, a rare, genuine smile that seemed to shift the very gravity of the room. "More than all right," he said. He turned, pointing to the midnight blue Tempest Hyperion the boys had admired the day before. "They told me they liked that one. I'd like to purchase it," he said clearly, "fully customized, every feature they mentioned." The room gasped. As if pulled by a single breath, Alina's eyes widened. "Sir, that's over $3 million. Victor signed the paperwork without a moment's hesitation. "And make sure the full commission goes to her," he added, his tone brooking no argument. Have you ever seen a single moment redefine someone's worth, not because it was given, but because it was recognized? As Daniel and Marcus watched Elena accept the commission slip, their smiles were small, almost private. They knew this wasn't about a car. It was about honoring the small kindness that had made all the difference. As the ink dried on the contract, Victor placed the keys into Daniel's and Marcus' hands with a gravity that made the whole room hold its breath. There were no cheers, no wild celebrations, just a quiet exchange, a transfer of something far greater than ownership. It was legacy, principle, and silent pride. The brothers walked out with their father, each step measured, deliberate. Around them, the once dismissive showroom staff now stood frozen, faces tinged with something more potent than regret: reflection. The two gleaming boat tails and the freshly purchased Hyperion waited outside, lined up like a quiet army. Victor paused at the dealership's threshold, casting one last look over the room. A room that had so easily judged, so quickly dismissed. And without a word he turned away, letting the roar of 3 engines fill the morning air, low and commanding like thunder murmuring across a distant sky. Inside, Gregory's absence lingered like a scar no one wanted to touch. Elena, meanwhile, stood taller, her promotion already whispered among the staff, a testament to the idea that kindness might move slower than cruelty, but it strikes much deeper when it arrives. Because in the end, what truly defines a person? Is it the flash of their watch, the cut of their suit, the brand of their shoes, or the weight of their character when no one is watching? The dealership slowly came back to life, but something fundamental had shifted. A few salesmen tucked away their phones. A customer in the corner stopped measuring a price tag and started measuring his words. Even the janitor, unseen and steady, nodded once, almost reverently. Outside, Daniel, Marcus, and Victor merged into the flow of morning traffic, 3 figures against the wide-open world. But the message they left behind echoed far longer than the sound of any engine. Respect isn't owed based on appearance. It's earned, quietly, in the spaces where no one thinks it matters. In a world that often rushes to judge by appearances, this story reminds us of something far more lasting. True worth is not worn on the body, it's carried in the heart. Daniel and Marcus were overlooked because they looked ordinary. But character, not clothing, defines a person's real value. How often in life have we missed seeing someone's true light because we were too busy noticing the surface? Perhaps the measure of a good life isn't in what we accumulate, but in how gently we treat others, especially when we believe no one important is watching. Kindness, quiet and steadfast, often leaves deeper marks than any grand gesture. And dignity, once recognized, has a way of lighting up not just one life, but everyone it touches. Maybe, as we move through our days, the greatest choice we can make is not to ask, "What do they look like?" but instead to wonder, who might they truly be? Because real strength is never loud, it simply stands, patient, unwavering, and true. The dealership was silent long after the engines disappeared into the horizon. In that stillness, something stronger than noise lingered. The quiet power of dignity reclaimed without a single raised voice. No celebrations, no applause, just the certainty that respect had been earned, not demanded. In the days that followed, Whitmore Luxury Motors changed. New policies were put in place. Staff whispered of the day judgment was exposed under a clearer light. And though no plaque would ever mark it, those who were there would remember how quickly assumptions crumble when truth stands tall. The echo of what happened there would ripple outward, a quiet reminder that every life deserves to be seen, not sized up. If this story stayed with you, share it. Subscribe to Echoes of Racism so these voices don't fade into silence. In the meantime, I've chosen 2 stories I think will move you just as much. Take care, and we'll see you soon.